Long overdue topic for us, something that we should have talked about long ago. We're glad that Suzanne Schulte, president of the Defense Forum Foundation and chair of the North Korea Freedom Coalition, and one of the country's preeminent experts on what's happening on the ground in North Korea. Faith McDonald is the director of religious liberty programs and of the Church Alliance for New Sudan at the Institute on Religion and Democracy. Reverend Mark Gonzalez is the founder and executive director of the Hispanic Action Network. And of course, Frank Gaffney is still with us. Frank, give us, set this issue up for us in terms of the persecution of Christians and what's happening around the world.
Well, I'm really thrilled to be here with people who know a lot more about it than I do, Armstrong. But, you know, from my perspective, this requires, as you say, our urgent attention simply because what's happening, by some estimates to as many as 215 million Christians around the world, is they're suffering not just, you know, hardship and various kinds of oppression. They're being heavily persecuted. That's from a group called Open Doors USA, which monitors this very closely. And we'll be talking about, I think, some of the countries in which this is happening, but it's happening globally. And they're finding themselves exposed to everything from rape and torture and crucifixion to beheadings and genocidal murder. And that is a story that is not only horrific enough to demand our attention, but it is horrific enough to demand our action. You
know, Ms. Schulte, what is the history of this? This didn't happen in the last 50. Where did it all start?
Well, I want to echo what Frank said with what's happening for the persecutions worldwide. But what happened in North Korea is from the very beginning, Christians were rounded up, pastors and priests killed because Kim Il-sung set himself up as God. So he had to wipe out religion, Christianity in North Korea. And by 1962, he had announced that they had killed all the priests and all the pastors and jailed all the believers. And if you want to understand what it's going to look like when Christians are persecuted and when Christianity is banned from a nation, look at North Korea. Because it is the darkest place on earth. They are the most suffering people on this earth.
So how does it play out in these countries?
Well,
and if you know you're going to be persecuted, why do you find yourself in these places? Knowing that these countries are so against you, they will persecute you, they will rape you, and they will take your life. Why do Christians find themselves in these places?
Well, in the case of North Korea, and definitely you need to talk with Faith about Sudan, but in the case of North Korea, what's very interesting is that I will make the point that Christianity is actually growing in North Korea, despite the persecution, because in the face of the evil that is there, that the Christians are the ones that are responding to the crisis. They're the ones that are involved in the Underground Railroad. They're the ones that are rescuing the refugees that are trying to escape. They're introducing the gospel message. You talk to North Koreans who escaped from North Korea in the horrible situation there, they say that they were told that when they get to China, look for this. These people will help you. And they believe that the Christians are crazy because they're told that the Christians will help you just to help you, because that's what they do. It's a concept that's beyond them because they're slaves to the dictatorship. They're brainwashed from childhood to believe that Kim Jong-un now is their God. And so the whole concept of Christianity is revolutionary in North Korea. But I believe that the church is growing because they're being introduced to the gospel, because it's the Christians that are leading the fight.
But Ms. McDonald, there's a lot of strife and unrest in Sudan. Yes. The president recently just had to step down. But Sudan is not North Korea. How it's spreading in Sudan is quite different from how it's spreading in North Korea. What is the difference? And yet the results are the same.
Well, that's true. And of course, there are two countries, Sudan and South Sudan. But in Sudan, when the country split, the president of Sudan said, now there will be no more Christians. He said, they have their country in the south, so we are going to be a totally Islamic country. But the history of Sudan goes back to Philip, who met the official from the court of Queen Candace on the road in Gaza in the Bible, and that was Nubia, that was Cush, an ancient Christian kingdom. So Christianity has been there, the roots have been there. I believe the Spirit of God has stayed there in spite of what happened to come and take over the country. And now you've got a government, the Islamic government of Sudan, that is trying to wipe out the Christians.
Cleanse.
Right, exactly. Ethnically cleanse, culturally cleanse. People can't speak their own languages. They have to speak Arabic. The Nuba Mountains of Sudan and Blue Nile State genocide is taking place, which, you know, during the war between the North and the South, there was genocide in the Nuba Mountains too. So this is the second genocide of the same people group, which has been Christians and Muslims living together in peace. But the government has pushed on this, bombing the Nuba Mountains. People have to hide in caves, and it's a genocide that's taking place because, for one reason, because of Christianity.
Pastor Gonzalez, why are they so threatened by Christianity, and why does it continue? I mean, these people are leaders of nations. They've got the power. They have the control of people. What is it that is so threatening? And how is this any different than what happened during the days of the Holocaust, where Jews were burned because Hitler felt they were a threat? But Hitler felt they were a threat more because of the money issue and the economy. It had less to do with what we're talking about now, whether they're Christians. It had more to do with the fact of how he felt he needed to take away their economics, their corporations, to fuel the economy of Nazi Germany. But here we're talking about, this is a religious issue. It's an issue of faith. What is so threatening about Christianity?
Well, you know, there is evil exists on the earth, on the planet, and we know that. And this goes all the way back to Herod, when they're trying to get rid of, you know, baby Jesus at that time. And so
but what is it about Christianity that is so threatening to these evil regimes?
Because Christianity is one of those that we believe that there's only one way to heaven, one way. The only way is Jesus Christ. And from that standpoint, it begins to threaten, you know, other religions, other people groups, other...
But it's not as if they believe this, they're going to overthrow the North Korean government, they're going to overthrow the Sudanese government. I mean, it's just, they have a right to their beliefs, they have a right to worship like we have here.
They don't, is the problem, Armstrong, as you know. In most of these countries, and going back to what you were asked earlier, people don't have a choice as to where they're going to live. If they find themselves in those countries, most of them won't let them out. This is one of the reasons that we think it's so important that religious freedom be respected and be part and parcel of what we're promoting as a nation, because it is, in our own country, of course, our foundational principle, our fundamental freedom here, freedom of religion. And to see it so badly abused because it threatens these regimes, that's how they see it. It is an alternative power center because these people believe in God, not in the dear leader or in the, you know, jihadist government of their nation. And so they repress them. And what we need to know about is not only how is this happening, who's doing it, but what can we do to stop them?
Where's the...
I would just say, adding that, Armstrong, for North Korea, Christianity is a direct threat because Kim Jong-un set himself up as a god.
Anybody with common sense knows he's not God. I mean, come on.
North Korean people believe he's God. When Kim Il-sung...
Well, they're brainwashed.
They are brainwashed. Yeah. They're brainwashed, but they took the tenets of Christianity and they perverted it into the Juche ideology. They set up the Trinity, the Holy Trinity. Kim Il-sung is God. Kim Jong-il is the Jesus figure, and Juche ideology is the Holy Spirit. It's a direct affront to a twisted perversion of the Holy Gospel, and I believe the reason why they did that was because when Kim Il-sung was a child, he was raised in a Christian home, he saw the power of the Christian faith, because it was the Christians predominantly who signed the Korean Declaration of Independence when they were under the Japanese rule. It's the Christians that stand up for basic human rights. And if you're going to be a dictator and you're going to enslave your people, then you don't want them to believe that they are made in God's image and they have certain freedoms and human rights just by being born as human beings. And that's why it's a threat in all these regimes, but especially in North Korea, because I can tell you that...
Hold that point, because I've got to get the pastor more in this conversation, because Frank sort of just took it from him, and I understand Frank has a lot to say.
Just helping him out.
Yeah. We believe in balance here. And where's the United Nations, and where is it they find success in fighting these bloody regimes? We're going to talk about that and much more when we come back. Don't go away. Let me welcome back Frank, Ms. Schulte, Ms. McDonald, and Mr. Gonzalez. You know, I just find it I don't know how to put it. I mean, it's as if we're living in a Neanderthal period where people are being persecuted because of their faith, raped, killed, subjugated. I mean, you have the United Nations, you have all these organizations that you give this money to, and you can't save and alleviate this issue with persecuted Christians. And I don't want people to watch this show today. I mean, and listen, you know, here's the thing about it. I'm looking at the list of some of these countries like North Korea, Sudan, Darfur, China, India, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, France, Nigeria, and Libya. And boy, we've heard the stories in Nigeria, but where are these humanitarian organizations? I mean, what will this ever change? Sounds like it's getting worse.
Yes and no. That's part of why we're here. And we appreciate this opportunity because there's this Save the Persecuted Christians new initiative organization that is bringing light to those that are on the ground doing work, and at the same time bringing light to the message and the atrocities that are taking place across the world. Because a lot that's going on is we're not aware of it. We don't know what's taking place. For us that follow the news, that it's our job to do these things, and we do it, and we're being aware of what's happening around in our country and around the world. We know these things, but the ordinary, everyday citizen individual is not aware of what's taking place. And that's what needs to happen. It needs to be a grassroots uprising to take place in America and around the world to let people know enough is enough. We're no longer going to stand for this, and we're about to do something about it. And that's what we're aiming here to do. And that's why we're here, to share that message and let people know there is things that can take place. There are things that you can do in this hour to make sure awareness happens, that we can begin to do our part as Americans and here in America, so this will begin to stop across the world, because America plays a role across the world, as we all know.
America plays a role. These countries should play a role. And these organizations, these humanitarian organizations. What about the United Nations? America cannot be the police and save the world. I mean, this is just absolutely common sense.
Armstrong, we have a special mandate, though, as Christians to our brothers and sisters around the world, and the churches especially. We're speaking to churches in America with this coalition and saying it's time that you cared about your brothers and sisters. We want to see this in the DNA of churches in America, to care, for it to be second nature, to think of us as one body of Christ around the world, and therefore we have a responsibility to help. And as Pastor Gonzalez said, to get informed. We have the internet. People can use the internet for things other than sensational and watching dog videos. They can use it to find out what's happening to their brothers and sisters around the world. And we need to be unified as a body in order to speak the way that the Jews did for the Save Soviet Jewry campaign, which Frank has talked about a lot.
You know, Susan, here's the thing. You don't even hear about these priests being beheaded and this violence and this persecution from the mainstream media, as if it doesn't exist.
Right, right. Well, particularly in the situation in North Korea, because it's so isolated and so cut off and it's restricted, people can't go there. And a lot of what motivates us is visuals and seeing things, and because nobody has seen the inside of a North Korean political prison camp, so it's hard for people to understand what's happening.
What does it look like?
Oh, it's hard. The political prison camps are horrible. We have satellite images to prove they existed, but when we had survivors of the camp first testify in 1999 about these the political prison camps, people didn't believe them.
What stories did they tell?
Well, the horrible conditions, slave labor, meager rations. They're basically worked and starved to death, completely unsanitary conditions. The death rate is extremely high. In some camps, people go there and you never see them again. It's a horrible thing, and anybody who's a believer, that's where they're sent. If they're discovered to be a Christian, that's where they're sent. But I wanted to just tell you that the gospel, the reason why the North Koreans is such a threat is because if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, that is a direct affront to the Kim regime, because for the Kim regime, they are God. So that is why Christianity is seen as a direct threat to the regime. And part of what happened when refugees were trying to escape, they would meet Christians in China that were trying to help people, pastors like Pastor Gonzalez, and people that were trying to rescue these refugees. When the Chinese, when they would get arrested and then forced back, the first thing the North Koreans would ask, did you meet a Christian? and if they found out they had, they would send them to a camp. They're so in fear of the Christian faith because it's a perversion.
So, so is it only Christians that rebel against Kim Jong-un and his God likeness in his country?
Well, no.
I'm sure it's not just Christians.
No, in fact, there's hardly any there's no organized opposition against the regime because of the repression there in North Korea is so severe. And, but people that escape come to, it's very common for North Koreans to become believers because they realize the Holy Trinity, because it's the perversion of what they've been brainwashed their whole lives, and they realize Kim Jong-un is not God. In fact, one North Korean defector, a young lady in her 20s, who defected, she lived in Pyongyang. She was part of the elites of society in North Korea. She said that when Kim Jong-il died, her whole family thought they were going to die. That's how brainwashed they are. She thought, oh, when are we dying? Because our God died. So he thought he was going to die. But she said that the way to change that regime is the gospel message. Because when people find out that Kim Jong-un is not God, there is actually the one true God, that regime is over.
Well, Kim Jong-un is not even God. I mean, let me mention this to you. One of the interesting things about the Sudan, and I've researched this often, is this how much, so much of the Islamic faith has such disdain for Christianity, which is rarely talked about. I mean, when you think about even during the Holocaust, they were there supporting and siding with Hitler during the Holocaust. They were some of the biggest movers of the slave trade. I mean, and no one wants to talk about just how Islam is so anti-Christian and why.
Well, it's part of Sharia, is that it will dominate everybody else. Christians and Jews actually get relatively better treatment than people of other faiths, other unbelievers. But it's pretty horrific still. They're treated as second-class citizens, which means essentially slaves. But it answers your question in part, Armstrong, because the influence of these Sharia supremacists, notably in an organization most of us haven't heard of, but it's actually the largest multinational organization in the world other than the United Nations, and it largely dominates the United Nations. It's called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. It is so influential that the UN is not doing what it should to help these persecuted Christians. In fact, in refugee camps across the Middle East in particular, they're basically Muslim only because it's not safe for Christians to be in those refugee camps. And as a result, only the Muslims get the refugee benefits from the United Nations. But to your question about the people, the humanitarian organizations, these private charities, many of them are members of our Save the Persecuted Christians Coalition, for example. Voices of the Martyrs, Open Doors, the Philos Project, the Nazarene Fund, among them. These are doing great work, in many cases in very dangerous conditions, to try to help Christians. But here's the problem. They're trying to deal with the symptoms of persecution. And what we realize is needed is to deal with the systemic problem, what's causing the persecution, the persecutors themselves. And that's what this Save the Persecuted Christians campaign modeled, as Faith said, after a very successful one, unbelievably successful one, that was run to try to protect Soviet Jews, another persecuted minority in the Soviet Union 40, 50 years ago. That worked, and it started, interestingly enough, with signs that were put outside of churches, in some cases synagogues in particular, saying simply, free the Soviet Jews. Today, we believe, Save the Persecuted Christian signs ought to be out in front of churches across America. In fact, if people go to our site, savethepersecutedchristians.org, they can get a free sign for their church to demonstrate the solidarity with these people and the help we want to give these humanitarian organizations.
We should put a billboard in our show, Save the Persecuted Christians, with a telephone number.
That'd be wonderful.
I mean, we should do that, and we're going to do it.
All right.
And we're going to do it soon.
On your social media.
Oh, no, on this TV show. So when we go live, you can see that billboard, Save the Persecuted Christians. We all have a role to play, and we'll be back.
Amen.
Things we like to do. You know, we get so bogged down in talking about the persecution of Christians until sometimes you almost sound scripted because you say the same things over and over again. You know, we have about 10 minutes left in the show. I like to really talk about, before we talk about how we get into the solutions to empower people across the country, what is it that you don't talk about enough that is so simple that just the everyday person can relate to? Not just what you think people know, What is it that you don't talk about enough that happens under these regimes? Faith.
Wow. Well, for instance, in Nigeria right now, people may have heard of Boko Haram because they know that all those girls were abducted, but they don't know that there's another group that's persecuting Christians and killing other people as well, even more now. The Fulani who used to be just called Fulani herdsmen are now Fulani jihadists and have been armed by Middle Eastern countries with high-tech weapons and are wiping out entire villages of Christians in Nigeria. And I belong to the Anglican Church of Nigeria, so for me this is personal, and these are a lot of Anglicans. There's more Anglicans in Nigeria than there are anywhere else in the world. Some people don't know that either, but this is a desperate situation, and people are fleeing the country who can, but most of them are just being wiped out, entire villages in northern and central Nigeria.
Suzanne?
Well, I would say that just that the fact that I really do believe that the church is growing in North Korea, and because of information flowing in, that the North Korea today is not the North Korea of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il because of information. And things have changed dramatically there because during the famine, the women of North Korea created a market system. So North Korea actually has a free enterprise capitalist system, market system, and that's why people are surviving today. It was totally created by the women of North Korea. And I know that when we see North Korea, when we see film from North Korea, people see the goose-stepping soldiers and the people fawning over the statues of Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung. But we have to remember the people of North Korea are getting access to information, and the most important thing we can do is to speak up for them and talk about their human rights, to talk about the fact that they have fundamental freedoms that they're born with. Simply by being born, they have those freedoms. And one of the things we do is we do a daily program into North Korea called Free North Korea Radio, which is done by defectors. And we have a part of that program as a gospel program. And all we're doing is telling them the truth. And the defectors will tell you, the truth will set them free.
You know, where is the church? Has it lost some of its luster, some of its moral authority? Can it really make a difference? Does it have the power that it once had to make people change just because of this church and the message that it has? Because it doesn't seem that the church is having the impact in these matters that it should have. Why? Why has the church lost so much of its influence?
Well, a lot of times we've gotten into a society that we're always about being politically correct, and
the pastors,
and just in general, and as well as the church. And so, and I say that working with tens of thousands of churches across America. So I am not just shooting this across the bow. I've been a pastor, I'm a minister, I preach the gospel. So I know this, and my life is pastors. With that said, but at the same time, the most influential platform in America is the pastor and is that pulpit. And we've seen studies are there, studies have been made, political groups make whole strategies around how do we get the church, how do we get evangelicals, how do we get Christians, and all these things. Why? Because at the end of the day, if we could get a pastor to say and bring an awareness to what's taking place to other Christians and what's happening in society, it makes the difference. And that's why we're doing this. You know, the Save the Persecuted Christians Coalition, we're coming together to do just that in on every platform to make sure that we're getting millennials, we're getting pastors, we're getting the common day, the ordinary person that might be just driving down the street or might be checking out their Facebook at the end of the day or whatever the case may be, so they can know, because we don't talk about it enough from the pulpit, because at the same time folks are saying, well, we live in a society, everything's political, I don't want this coming necessarily in my church. Well, the point is everybody goes to a church somewhere, and we're believing that if we can get the pastor to break through and say, you know what, the word is clear. When we cry together. When we hurt together. When somebody's in pain, we're in pain together. And our brothers across the ocean, our brothers across the sea, they're dealing with these issues, and we're going to take a stand here in America and bring this awareness, and we believe that's about to take place with this campaign. So
what we'd like to do here, with the time that is left, help us build a movement. How do we build a movement today to inspire the people who are watching us and the word of mouth? How does that start? How does it work?
Can I just point out one thing? Suzanne and I are wearing on our lapels a pin here that has as a symbol the letter N in Arabic, or Nun as they call it. And the reason that's important, Armstrong, is because it's a symbol now, an international symbol. Thanks to what ISIS did in villages in Iraq and Syria, where they painted this symbol on the door of Christian homes to target them for persecution, to evict the people who live there, to sell them into slavery, to rape them, to torture them, to murder them. This is now one of the ways in which we're trying to mobilize people, is by using this symbol to call attention to the plight of these folks all over the world, not just in the Islamic nations, but all over the world. Hindus are being, engaged in a kind of ethnic or religious cleansing in India under the government of Prime Minister Modi. In China, there's an underground church that's been abandoned in favor, including, I'm sorry to say, by the Pope. Talk about the moral authority of the church, in favor of the official church of China. These are the sorts of things that are happening, and we need, to answer your question, we need a movement in America that could do something, and very quickly, what I remember from my youth was done on behalf of these Soviet Jews. A movement began with signs outside of synagogues. It turned into a political force. A guy I worked with by the name of Scoop Jackson turned it into leverage, something called the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. It kept the Soviet Union from getting financial support, most favored nation status. When they didn't get it, another guy I worked with later, Ronald Reagan, used the fact they didn't have that financial safety net to take them down.
So what you
which freed not only the Jews from the Soviet Union, but hundreds of millions of others.
So I need this symbol.
That's what we need
because
now.
I want to wear it until the end of April. I want Aaron and AD to make sure that we have the billboard that we play on the show until the end of April. Continue building the movement while I wear the pin. Continue.
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. Sign up, get involved. Visit the website for Save the Persecuted Christians. Get involved. Sign up at that website so you can get information and be informed. And I do want to get a banner and get your church involved.
Order a banner.
You can reach out to people to find speakers that can talk about
this
the
persecuted. This is simple things that we can do.
Invite Frank to come speak, their pastor to come speak at your church. And
there it is. We already have it up. We've already started.
All right.
And I do want to add to something that the pastor said too.
Is there a number we should add to this? Come on.
There is, and I don't have it right now. Just go to that site.
We're building a movement here today. Let's continue the movement.
Okay.
But in addition to that, I have to say that we have to put God back in our public life as well.
Well, God's always in every aspect of my life. So I don't need to put him back. He never left.
But our country, as a nation, we do.
I don't think God is as far removed from our lives as the media and others try to make us believe. Okay,
but
God is always there.
But there's a lot of intimidation of Christians.
We got to be bold.
We have to be bold. And I want to give you an example.
Like
I took a group of North Korean defectors to the White House, and we were in a building, and we were in the OEOB. We were meeting with somebody, and I said, these North Koreans would be so blessed if you would pray for them. And this man who we were meeting with said, oh, do you think it's okay if I pray here? That's how much we've been pushed out.
Are there cups that we can create and put on this desk, similar to this? I'm going to have my man Kareem. We're going to create cups. We're out of time. But build a movement. Is anything?
Yes.
We got a minute left. We're building a movement here.
To tell the pew and tell the congregants
pastors
to begin to get this voice out, get the word out, put a banner in front of your church so we can create this critical mass that we need across America to make sure there's 335,000 churches across this nation. We need them to step on board with this campaign and let other people know what our brothers and sisters are experiencing in other parts of the world.
Let's show that billboard again. SaveTheChristians.org. The pin is important. There it is. SaveThePersecutedChristians.org. We got to get us a telephone number. I'm shocked you don't have the telephone number. We're building a new one.
We need it before it's over.
Yeah, we want to talk about your 10 seconds, buddy.
Hold the persecutors accountable.
Yes.
That's what this movement is going to do. We are blessed to have your support for it.
And I'm an unapologetic Christian, okay? I make no bones about that I'm a Christian and pray every day. And I pray for those people that are suffering through this nonsense, that these people who think they're God, and there's nothing about them that's even close to God. Good day, everybody. Save the Christians.
Amen.
Yes,
Amen.
That's what we have to do.